You're listening to the AID Network.
Hey friend, welcome back to another sample of Adventures in Design podcast. What you're going to hear in this clip is from our Freedom Week special for members of the Circle of Trust, where I interviewed 10 working professionals, asked them each 5 questions about freelance. If you do the math, it's 50 questions, 50 answers to guide you better in your world of freelance. Today we're talking to Nathan Goldman, and the question is, how do you price out your freelance work? Diversifying your income, sizing up your client, comparison to similar projects you've done, and overshooting the real price while looking out for red flags. Let's get into it. To hear the rest of this podcast, the whole 100-minute episode, and the whole week-long series, visit our website at aidpodcast.com. How have you figured out the budget? You've got time down, you've got time management down, but how have you figured out to get the budget right? Because if we do the math, you live in San Francisco, Dan lives in LA, so you're in 2 of the top 5 most expensive markets to live in. And, you know, you each, I wouldn't say you guys aren't ballers, but you're not scrapers. You know, you're solid middle class, upper middle class designers. I'd love to know, when you look at all of this, how can you figure out what the client can afford, what you need them to pay, how that breaks down into 2 guys, how that goes into DKNG's overhead? Like, you got a lot of moving parts when somebody gives you the magic words of, so Nathan, how much do you think it's going to cost?
Yeah, and I think it's also easy to get seduced by a number up front, and then for us it's a 2-person team. So yeah, once we break it down between 2 guys and take out taxes, and what if it takes 25% longer, and just the time stopping and starting, by the time you break all that down and get to the bottom line of what we walk away with on a particular project, it might not be as, you know, glamorous as it seemed up front. So we try to be realistic about that. Yeah, this is definitely one of the scariest parts of being a freelancer, is the unknown, because we don't know what clients are coming in our door 2 months from now, if any. You know, the biggest part of budgeting for me has been about diversifying where our sources of income come from.
So crucial.
And then being realistic about what those are, so that, you know, let's say a huge client doesn't walk in the door next month. That's okay, because I know that, you know, we're still teaching our classes online. We have our retail store going. We have new releases coming out. We have events coming up. I know that there are 5 or 6 different, you know, revenue streams for the company. So we kind of hedge our bet in that way, that we're not just, you know, crossing our fingers and hoping.
Before I started the podcast, I literally drew out on a piece of paper, what's every way that this new career path will allow me to earn money? And I thought, well, there's the subscriber model, there's advertising, there's consulting, you know, being a personality on the podcast and helping others out with their life. There's going out and speaking, there's merchandise sales, and then there's the unknown. I want to make sure there's at least 5 or 6 ways to earn money from this gig before I just dive in. Back in the days of being a designer, diversifying how your income comes in. The beauty of it, Nathan, and you know this, you want some money to come in every week.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want some money to come in every day, because it takes out the sting. And what I found was that even though web sales weren't ginormous, it was a constant trickle into the PayPal account. And the PayPal card became gas, food, living. So that when we went out and did the weekend show or got the client bill, that money seemed so much bigger, because it wasn't like, all right, well, since the last time we got paid, we got $5,000 in debt. So this 10 grand just kind of gets us back to 5 up above sea level. You know, it was like when the 10 grand came in, it actually felt like $10,000 for the first time in a long time.
Yeah. And I think once you have that diversification in place, that's also what's going to give you the confidence to start raising your rates.
Yes.
Because if you're scared and you're desperate for that one client job, you know, you'll do that job for anything because it just means some income. But I think, once we have some confidence and some security with what is coming in, then when that big corporate client knocks on our door, we can kind of think about, we know how many hours we're going to spend and what we need to make, but that number is not something the client ever sees. We're more thinking about, what is this client used to paying for design? What's it worth to them? And, what can we get away with, basically? And we're not taking advantage of anyone, but we want to charge a fair going rate for what someone pays in, the TV industry versus someone that is starting a new garage band. They're totally different budgets, and we want to be, on the right level for each one. And that helps out everyone. If we're charging appropriate rates, then that means that when that TV station or whoever hires someone else for the next job, they know what to pay, and they're not saying, well, some guy gave me a super lowball rate, so now I need you guys to match that. So we're always trying to kind of push our rates a little bit and see what's going to be worth it for us to compete with all those different forms of revenue and make it worth our while, because we could spend our time doing something else if we don't take on that job.
And the thing to keep in mind for somebody who's like, oh, but I just want to treat everyone fair. Everybody's not going to use your artwork in the same way. So if you do something for a garage rock band, they're small and they're going to use the logo, but that's a small amount of usage of the artwork. But if you do something for Ford Motor Company and they end up actually using it and executing it, that's a lot more work. That's a lot more eyes on it. That's a lot more usage, right? So therefore, you do upcharge the big guy because the big guy's going to use it more. So calm down there with your morals. So is there any sort of equation you have, like a weird little machine that you can plug in client and the amount of time and the art style? Or do you just sort of look back on your greatest hits and be like, well, $15,000 was kind of fair for that. This kind of feels like that job. Because I know when they try to evaluate what the movies are going to make, they will literally be like, okay, last time a movie like this released on this weekend, this time of year, the gross was around $35 million. So all the case studies say that this should be a $35 million opening weekend, and it's wildly accurate. So I'm curious to know how you do it.
I'd say it starts off in a very just touchy-feely way of thinking about the project and what's the first number that comes to mind, essentially, like what feels right for this. And that's usually when I call Dan and say, okay, here's this project, here's the rough, what the project is, how much time I think it's going to take, and what the usage is going to be. And I'll ask Dan, okay, just based on that 30-second pitch, what number do you come up with in your head? And I'd say 9 times out of 10, we're within 10% of each other of what we think that number should be.
Yeah.
If we're ever far off, it's more like because one of us didn't quite understand the full scope, or I say, yeah, we could charge that much. Or if you remember last time we did something like this a few years ago, we charged X. So what if we go for that? So typically we just kind of ballpark a number based on what we feel in our head. But then after that initial ballpark, I kind of do a gut check because typically I'm going to put together some type of itemized proposal for the client. And I can't just say, hey man, I just thought $50,000 for this. And that's all the information you get.
Yeah.
At that point, I want to try to sell them a bit on why this project is worth $50,000 to them and break it down into all these different parts. And that's a good exercise just to figure out, if you're doing a logo and you think about all the different rounds and are you going to provide a style guide and usage and colors and things, how much time is that all going to take? What's it all worth to them? And so in that stage, that's where I might come back and say, well, even though I thought it was $40,000, it's actually going to be 45 or even less if we think it's going to be less time. But to answer your question, there's not a set equation for it, but there's definitely a number of steps to try to make sure that we're, hitting the right number.
Have you ever done this in an effort to make higher wages? I would have a conversation with Beth and be like, okay, I think that for where we're at in our career, this is a $5,000 job for us. And we'd both agree $5,000 seems fair. And then when I would be on the phone or writing out the email, I would just feel like the quarterback. I would feel like I was in the zone, and I would call an audible and I would just tell them 6,500, 7,500. Like I would just look at it and I go, wait a minute. My instinct is telling me that I can put a little bit more on here, and I would do it. It would get approved, and I'd be like, just got an email back. We're approved for 7,500. Beth would be like, I thought we agreed on $5,000. I'm like, I know, but I felt at that last minute that I could get a little bit more.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, if $5,000 is what you want for that project, then you kind of have to go in at $7,000
Sure.
or something, because there's a good chance the client's going to say, that's kind of pushing our budget a little bit. Could we do 5,500?
Right.
And then you're like, sweet, we'll make it happen. And, that's even a little bit more than you wanted. Or what we'll try to do is, if a client says, so yeah, we always try to go in a little high. We want the client to be squirming a little bit. The worst feeling is if the client just approves it right away.
Okay.
And then we're like, shit, we could have gotten more. And I think we brought up this analogy before of whatever that movie was with Jonah Hill about arms dealers.
Yeah.
Where they're like selling bullets to the government or something. They're like, we had to go with you guys. You just lowballed the shit out of everyone else. And they're like, just curious, like, what was everyone else? And they're like, I think the next closest bid was like $50 million more than you guys. And they're just like, damn it. But yeah, we always try to go a little high just to test the waters. And again, it's just about having that confidence of knowing that it's very rare that a client just says, I'm insulted, fuck you, I'll never talk to you again. It's more, that's when the negotiation starts of, let's talk about what we can afford. And we then try to see if there's any parts of the project we could take away, being like, we could do it for $1,000 less, but we're only going to give you 3 options instead of 5. Is that okay with you? And I think that's a good strategy, because then you're not just devaluing yourself and saying, yeah, you're right, I'm not worth it. I'll do the same amount of work for less money.
Because that shows that you were fishing, and at the last moment you threw on an extra $2,500. But you're absolutely right. If they want to take money off, there should always be a concession on their end. Like whenever one side wants something, they should be willing to give more for more money or accept less for less money.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to be like, okay, well, we can do this, but we needed to take off a round of revisions, or we need to take off a comp. Either way, you're kind of winning. And you're right. Like, I can't remember a time that anybody ever said, all right, well, that's it, you're ridiculous, I'm leaving. But there have been plenty of emails where somebody's like, hey, we want you to come out and speak. What is your rate? I tell them what the rate is, and they don't write me back. I'm like, well, that saved me a bunch of time. This is a rule of my thumb. If you tell them your fee and they don't even write back, that means that they wanted to pay you 50% less than what your rate was, right?
Yeah.
If your rate is $10,000 and they won't even write you back, that means that they wanted to pay less than $5,000, and they're too embarrassed to even counter offer. That's how far off they are. Good riddance. I'm glad it didn't work out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess one other red flag to look out for is the client that says, we don't have that much budget for this project, but go ahead, give me the bro rate now. And next time we work together, I'll give you the full fee.
Never.
That never happens.
Never happens. You never see them again. It never gets there. They go around telling everybody that story, giving everybody hopes and dreams that never happen. Thank you for listening to this sample of Adventures in Design with my friend Nathan Goldman of DKNG Studios. As you know, there's no real science to figuring out how to price a job. There's no mathematical equation that we know of yet just to plug all the data in. But it is about informing yourself to make great decisions, and decisions that allow you to earn more and more each time. If you have a secret that we didn't discuss, by all means, let us know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for subscribing, liking, sharing, and thank you for visiting our website, aidpodcast.com, where you can find full episodes, over 800 of them, of Adventures in Design. Thank you so much for listening or watching, whatever we call this. Good day and good design. We'll be back tomorrow with another sample clip of Adventures in Design podcast.